Hey there, men. Welcome back to another episode of the Wolf and Iron Podcast. Happy Truck Talk Thursday to you all. Glad to be talking to you. Glad to be sharing some thoughts with you here from my truck as I make my way to the coffee shop and then eventually to work. Man, I gotta tell you guys what, it has been a roller coaster week for us as a family. Before I jump into the episode here, I thought I'd just give you a little bit of an update as I record this. These things come out sometimes months after I recorded them, but still it kind of clues you in on some of the happenings in the Arbor household. My son Aiden, as you guys, many of you know, he dealt with something called pandas several years ago, and that's pediatric autoimmune neuro disorder and syndrome or psychosis. I can't remember exactly. Let's start with a P. So anyhow, but it sounds cute, called pandas. But it's basically something that you get streptococcus is what it is. That's what the S stands for. The strep, you guys probably have all had strep or know somebody who's had strep in their life. Well, usually just is in your throat. You really achy, you feel terrible, and then it goes away after a week or two. Maybe you're taking some antibiotics or whatever. But for people who have weakened immune systems, it can actually go intracellular and really cause some serious issues and get into and attack the basal ganglia area of the brain and whatnot. And this happened to Aiden several years ago. We actually had it was almost like an overnight change that he went from just happy, fun kid to having massive anxiety, serious OCD, tics, all kinds of issues. And it was a very new thing at the time. And so we had a hard time tracking down what it was. We got some treatment for it a few years back, about 5 years ago, and he's come out of remission. He's had a relapse into it. Now it's not necessarily dealing with strep, so it's just called PANS, which is just sort of a broader spectrum of issues, but still in that kind of same category, still causes some of the same effects, and it's just really, really making it hard for him. He's had to drop out of college, come back home, live with us, which he kind of hates, and we're ready for him to move on to. Anyhow, long story short, we were going to go have this treatment done again that we had done before, but it had basically doubled in price. We couldn't afford it. Tried to do a fundraiser thing, made a little bit of money off of that, but it just wasn't enough to really get the treatment done. Started seeing some other doctors. They had a different protocol, but it was just still, things weren't progressing positively in the right direction fast enough, and so he's basically had to get another treatment. And so we took out a loan, and essentially we're just going to get this thing done. It's called an IVIG. They basically take 1,000 different the immune properties of 1,000 different donors, put them in some solution, and inject that into his bloodstream, and it causes your own immune system to reset, recalibrate, to kind of pick up some of the properties of this new immune system, and strengthens it. And that seemed to have a really positive effect for several years. But he got sick one time. We don't know if it was strep or what, but he got really sick. And a lot of times that just kind of opens the doorway again to this infection to get in there. So he's older now. We think that the older he gets, the more weight he puts on, the healthier he gets, the farther away he gets from the pediatric side of this, the safer he'll be. So maybe this is the last thing he's got to do. But it's just always tough, guys, whenever you see your kids struggling through something. And, you're kind of doing something that's relatively new. You're taking out money. You're going into debt for a treatment that you're just hoping that will be the solution. What father's not willing to do anything for their kids, And mother as well. It's been hard for my wife. So it's been just kind of a crazy week for us. Anyhow, so that's a little bit of an update. And hopefully this is all resolved, and by the time you hear this episode, you've been checking in on social media, and you've got the up and up, and you realize that this is all in the past and things are in a real positive direction. Just wanted to share that with you guys. So there are some things that we miss out on with premarital sex, and just to make sure you guys know that I'm not the guy that's preaching from some area that I don't have any experience in. My wife and I, we had premarital sex. We met when we were about 16 years old. It didn't take long for us to get hot and heavy. She was my first and remains my only. girl to have had sex with, and am I allowed to say girl now? Because she was a girl then. She's still a girl, but she's a woman now. You guys get what I'm saying, right? Now, I've just come to the... I had to stop here for a second because one of those guys is holding a sign in the road that says stop. And then he just kind of twirls it to slow, but he didn't seem real confident. And we'll see if I run into anybody here. Anyhow, so I've kind of gone through this whole thing of having premarital sex, wishing that I hadn't, wishing we had taken things more slow. And as we, now as adults and have been married for 23 plus years and have known each other for over, just about 25 years now, we've begun going to counselors over the last couple of years, and it's like layers, it's like onions of different things that we're kind of peeling back and seeing things that we didn't do that was, we should have done. It would have had a better foundation for us, and even stuff from our childhood, right? Trauma and family dynamics and all these other kinds of things. It's really interesting, but there's a lot of things surrounding premarital sex that I'm imagining a lot of you guys are listening to this. You've either had sex before marriage, you've probably had sex with other girls that are not your wife, and it does some damage to us. We miss out on some things, some really, really good things that my wife and I are now trying to put back together. And the good news is you guys can start putting some of these things back together as well. So let's think back in the olden days, right? Or think about people who have better self-control than we did. Or maybe people who didn't have options to have sex, right, before marriage, because they were pimply and ugly or something like that. There are some things that you get by taking things slow that are just so good for the future of your relationship. And a lot of this has to do with laying down these kind of neurological templates and this building blocks of attraction, building blocks of connection that aren't just relying upon like this, you got to have sex and this big, emotional and chemical reaction that's taking place in the brain. So here's what happens when you have sex with somebody, especially for the first time. It's this big mega PDA or PEA, I can't remember the name of the chemical. There's this big rush of chemicals that just flood your body, all kinds of hormones and stuff like that makes you feel good, makes you feel really close and connected with this person. Now, this isn't just something like you get a rush of hormones and then it goes away after a couple of hours and then you're back to normal. Your body is laying down neurological templates with this as well. And so your mind is saying, hey, look, this was awesome. Let's do that again. And so they associate with that person the feeling of connectedness, oneness, just a feel good, this endorphins rush and all the kind of stuff that comes along with it. And it feels a lot like, being in love and all that. But it's also one of the highest highs that your body can have, naturally. And when you jump into a relationship and you skip all the other stuff leading up to that, and you don't wait on sex and you just, kind of jump into sex and it's hot and heavy, you basically experience the highest high with that person right off the bat. And there's not a lot of groundwork to kind of rely on when that high of, having sex and getting physical with each other wears off. And it will wear off over time, right? And you guys have probably experienced this in your own relationships. If you're married, or even if you're not married, you've been having sex with the same person for a while, and you're like, well, I like sex, but it's not like the same as it used to be. Like, it's the same old sex that we always have, or whatever the case might be. That high isn't there. That extreme rush of like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. Let's do this like, tomorrow at this time or later today. That doesn't happen, right? And a lot of relationships, a lot of marriages realize that this was what was the driving force behind their relationship. This was the thing that allowed them to feel connected, the sexual energy, sexual connection. And once that starts to wear off, they realize that they don't really have a whole lot of connectivity there, especially when kids are introduced, especially when those kids are at a young age and life gets crazy and schedules are weird and hormones are all over the place. I mean, she's got hormones that aren't really working like they did when she was pre-kids, and you're stressed out from work and whatever case is, and you're not having sex as much as you want to, right? And what's the groundwork there for the relationship? So if we think back into the olden days before people were jumping into the sack so early, you had these milestones of kind of foreplay, but really of just connectivity, kind of building that relationship. And it would usually start with something like holding hands. And you might do that for weeks or maybe a month, or months even. Hugging, right? And so this is, and by the way, when you hold a girl's hand for the first time, you get a rush there, guys. It's a good feeling. It's like, whoa, that's awesome. I like this girl. She's touching me. I'm touching her. This feels good. Let's look into each other's eyes and talk good things about each other. It's laying down neurological templates. And those things are going to be there, really until, the marriage ends, or they may be there until your brain, dies off. I'm a romantic, if you can't tell. But you do the same thing. You kind of go into hugging, right? Eventually kissing. And these are long, kind of drawn out processes over the periods of several weeks, if not several months. Sometimes people court and would date like this for several years. And sometimes you would experience this with one person, and maybe that's not the person for you. And so you got to the hand holding part, maybe the hugging part, and then decided, you know what, this is not for us. You break off the relationship. And you don't have all these deep, serious connections that have been laid down because you've had sex with them and all that kind of stuff. And so you got this gradual progression, right? Holding hands, hugging, kissing, and then eventually, touching, patting, right? You get into, hopefully not until marriage, but, let's say, the marriage, started to happen. Now you guys are getting into more sexual things. You're, under the clothes off, having sex, doing all that kind of stuff, but still enjoying some of those first stages of, sexual intercourse, sexual interaction, that kind of stuff. And when this is done within sex or within marriage, there are a couple of things that happen, especially I think for men, but also for women, I guess. I've not been a woman, so I can't verify this, but I know for men for sure. When a man gets married, there is a shift in his brain. There's a shift in our brain. And something says, it doesn't matter how long we've been dating, it doesn't matter how much we think that we've already been living together and it's just a piece of paper and it doesn't really matter, and now we're getting married. Look, when a man ties the knot and he goes before God, before his friends, and he stands before people and he says, I do, you're the woman for me for the rest of my life, there is a shift in our brains. And that shift says, we've got to protect, we've got to take care of them, we've got to be a good provider, we need to start thinking about having a family and raising kids and all this other kind of stuff. And if that doesn't happen, I can guarantee you that guy's holding on to some very childish and immature things. Because a man says, if I'm going to be connected and married to this woman for the rest of our lives, it's in my best interest and it's in her best interest for me to be the best man that I can be. And, and for us to both be the best that we can be. And so he wants to start building something and starts setting foundations there. Well, while this is going on, while this kind of stuff is churning in the mind of a man, he's also thinking so let me back up for a second. He's got this happening. I missed my turn back there. Sorry. I'm totally thrown off. And now I'm going to be late for getting coffee. I'll go to a different coffee shop. That's what I'll do. While he's got these kind of neurological kind of new things taking place in his mind because he's just gotten married, if he also then begins to have sex, he's associating sex with this woman and all this interaction and these hormones and all these things that feel so good with this whole scenario, with this whole dynamic that's taking place. Marriage, feel good, connection, positive. This is my woman. This is the person that I'm going to be with. This is the person I want to connect with, right? And so the way things are designed by God and the way things we've been told or used to be told in relationships was that you should wait until marriage to have sex. But people don't give us the reasons why. Nobody lays out like this. Like it says, well, when a man gets married, he has neurological changes. And when those are combined with sexual, interactions, there's just this great concoction of hormones and neuropathway things that are taking place that leads to like a really solid connection with his wife and a real solid tethering to his new family. And guys, we miss out on that. When we get things out of order, we miss out on this stuff. And here's the thing. If you've had premarital sex, if you and your wife, maybe you've had sex with different people before you got married, whatever your story happens to be, there's some virgin territory there that you still have got, you get a chance to take it, you get a chance to take advantage of. So you get to be the first guy, possibly, that not only is she married to, but, you know, you're going to invest time in holding hands and taking it slow, right? And looking into each other's eyes and not just thinking, oh, well, we're going to have sex tonight because we've already done all that other stuff at some point, right? Didn't we? Didn't we do that stuff? You get to be the guy that she can just hold and be with and talk to, right? With no sexual expectations. You basically get to kind of repair some things that should have been done right in the past. And you begin to build those neural pathways in, maybe not exactly like it could have been done back in the day, but there's still some virgin territory there. And what I would say, guys, is I really want to challenge you to do this. Doesn't mean you don't have to have sex, but it does mean that you should prioritize the small things that if you were courting back in the old days, that would have kind of led up to a really good, you know, strong, intimate relationship on multiple levels. Laying the groundwork there for what it means to be intimate. Physically intimate, emotionally intimate, all that kind of stuff. You get a chance to do that. And there's a really good chance that neither of you have had the opportunity to experience those things without sex being the major objective in the relationship. So I say this for you, I say this for myself, I also say it for our next generation, the kids that we're raising. Because instead of just telling them, hey, look, don't have sex before marriage, it's in the Bible somewhere, Jesus doesn't want you to do it, and but once you get married, you can have all the sex you want. Or, you know, oh, and by the way, here's some condoms just in case you do have sex, right? Give them that mixed message. That's not going to work. That's not getting things done the right way. Explain things to them. Help them to understand. There is a reason behind the why. There's a reason behind some of these laws. And these are things that we study now in science. This isn't just like dad and mom making up stuff to keep, you know, to keep your kids from getting pregnant or, you know, to hold off on the grandkids. Or just because we don't want our kids to experience pleasure. There are reasons for these things. And they're good reasons. And I think that it makes a lot of sense. So hopefully this is helpful, guys. You know, these are things that I wish I'd known back in the day. Would it have made a difference? I like to think so. I like to think that it would have changed me a little bit. But at the same time, I was horny and hard-headed, and that's a difficult combination to make headway on. So anyhow, hope you guys find this helpful. I appreciate you. Talk to you later.